Welcome back to Creative Conversations. In a surprise twist of events, this episode is going to be hosted by Adam, filling in for me while I was feeling a little under the weather. You may be wondering why this isn't just an episode of The Deficit. Well, to answer your question, we don't have a good reason for you. On that bombshell, I hope you enjoy this unique episode of Creative Conversations in which Adam talks to a seasoned local performer and software engineer, Earl Jenkins. You've already heard his song California Calling after my chat with Adam in our first episode of this show. So in a weird way, I feel like this kind of works. And if it doesn't, be sure to let us know in the comments. Or you could keep it to yourself. That's fine too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Creative Conversations. Normally, we do have our host, Ryan Threlfall, in. He's been a little under the weather today, so I've been called in to do my best to keep the topic of his show going and ask this lovely gentleman next to me all the questions and have a good conversation around the topic of creativity and what it means to them and their human spirit. I'm joined today with Earl Jenkins. He is a songwriter, musician, and in the daytime you said you're a software engineer as well?
That's right.
Excellent. So why don't you go ahead and tell me who you are?
Well, I don't know. I'm a guy.
I'm a guy? Cool.
I like to make stuff. I'm a very creative kind of person. I'm also very much a problem solver.
Nice.
Works well as a software developer, and it also works well as a musician, as an artist.
Cool.
So yeah.
Nice.
That's me.
Nice. So you were mentioning earlier before we started recording, you're kind of in the same field as me, like with the whole like attention deficit issues and stuff like that. I'm just curious as to how that has played out as a strength and as a weakness in your line of, well, most of your life. Is software engineering, I would imagine, must have been somewhat of a struggle getting to, at least from my perspective.
Well, attention deficit disorder got in the way of my scholastic endeavors for quite a while. And so, of course, I was delayed in never actually getting around to getting a higher education. So I started a little late. I find, and I'm sure that my career advancement sometimes has suffered because I have come across as being less focused or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing necessarily overt, but I might have been passed up for, hey, let's give Earl this thing because he seems a little more flaky potentially than this guy who's clearly very cut and dried,
Yeah.
even though Earl solved our problem and saved us, $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
But, we don't value that as much as we value people that appear to be more organized or more measurable, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's as and in a work environment, making yourself a resource that can be relied upon,
Mm-hmm.
and understood how they work is really important. But of course, it's only 3 to 5% of the people that have ADHD. So most people that are organizing type people really don't even understand people with attention deficit, anyways.
Yeah, it's a strange, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost counterintuitive, because one of the strengths that we have is being able to focus on multiple situations at the same time, right? But because of that, it seems almost as if we're less attentive to a single one, when in fact it's just that it's spread wider and we're doing it in a different way. But it doesn't really work in the traditional sense that people look for in the job place, right?
Sure, yes. And definitely the kind of people that like to organize things and therefore like to organize businesses or like to organize classrooms or like to organize whatever, they rise to those roles because they're good at them, but it's almost the antithesis of how an ADHD person tends to like to work, which is much more sort of a chaotic, sort of here, there, and everywhere. And then, of course, the challenge with ADHD is reining that into a final completed something.
This is my organized mess, and I take bits from each pile, right?
Exactly. Which really informs how, in terms of creativity, of how I create stuff, is I'm pulling stuff from all over. I said I'm a problem solver, and everything that I do, I'm always looking at How can I make this better, or how can I take that idea and mix it with this idea? There's this idea called synthesis
Mm-hmm.
that some people are very good at and some people are sort of normal at,
Yeah.
I guess. And I tend to be very good at it, taking ideas from here and ideas from here, and they don't seem to be apply to each other, but seeing how they can be fit together and used to produce some solution that's novel, sort of outside the box. So let's say ADHD people are very good at thinking outside the box.
Yeah, it's definitely its own form of creativity in that sense too, right?
There is a lot of, I mean, I struggle to figure out, how much of my personal creativity. I consider myself a fairly creative person compared to, sort of the average person that I encounter. And it's hard to say how much of that is me because I'm a creative person, and how much of that is the ADHD part of my brain helping to drive that creativity.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a bit of both, and I know that. I have a pretty good memory. People often call me the human Google because I know all these crazy random facts, and they don't need to Google it. They can just ask Earl. But you'd be surprised.
Yeah, when I was younger, I'm actually the same way. I know lots of interesting facts about random topics. One of my close friends when I was growing up used to call me the encyclopedia of useless knowledge.
Yeah, that's about right. But what happens is that because I have such a strong memory for various unrelated details, it works really well for being that kind of creative person. I know that not everybody with ADHD expresses the same thing about being able to retain ideas long term. So I think there's sort of different facets, and so it's not everything that I am creatively is ADHD.
Yeah,
but I'm sure it informs sort of. Helps to drive that.
So I want to get into the creative aspect of things, but just to warm up a little bit first, I would like to ask you a bit more about your profession as a software engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you find, if any, creativity plays into that line of work?
Software is a very creative process.
Yeah.
For what I do, which is, I think at least half of all software development ends up being building something that nobody's ever built before.
Okay, so that is creative as hell.
It's very creative. Yeah. Every software solution is a bespoke. People don't use that word properly, but it's effectively a bespoke solution. Obviously you're using ideas that have been used other places before, but you're solving a problem and everybody's got a slightly different problem to solve. Right.
Yeah.
So and I mean that's true of just about any kind of engineering, whether you're building a road or a bridge, or you're chemical engineering or whatever it happens to be. Is you're trying to take this thing that nobody's really built before, quite this way, and trying to do that. So there's a lot of creativity, and the lessons that I've learned about how to create and build doing software actually helped me with my songwriting quite a bit.
Cool.
Because I can do the same idea of building structure and working on parts of it here and working on parts of it here, and not worrying about having the whole thing and then being able to take that and adjust some pieces so that everything fits together and build out this structure and iterate over that in order to sort of polish off the edges and that sort of thing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you find that in the world of you're a music writer, obviously, right? So you make I've actually listened to a couple of your songs. They're very nice. Bit of a James Taylor essence to them. It's really cool that way. It's kind of a relief actually to hear someone playing something nice and soft for once. My life is generally surrounded by a lot of the harder sides of genres. I do dabble a lot in softer stuff as well, but it's just lately anything I seem to be around as far as music shows go, they're always highly produced and multifaceted and stuff. And to see a guy with a guitar and just a real put some real meaning on the meaning of lyrics and letting that do the work, that's really something to admire. So when you say the software engineering, learning that helped you with your songwriting, I'm just curious as to how that how that works, because like coming from where I am just absolutely like mentally handicapped when it comes to understanding computer sciences or coding or anything like that. I hear software engineer and I think of a guy in a chair typing out a bunch of code. And I have come to learn over the last few years that like coding is like a language all on its own. So where does that translate into your songwriting?
So, when people ask me what I do for a living, I
Yeah.
say I sit at a computer and solve problems all day, right? So, and problem solving is a very creative process.
Cool.
And when you're doing it, when you're getting paid to do it, to build something in a system where if you don't do it the way that fits the system properly, it's wrong, and it tells you it's wrong because it doesn't work, right? So, so I write this software, and there's lots of different ways to write a loop, and there's lots of different ways to build the logic and the data flow, and one of the tricks I've learned. I do a lot of mentoring for less experienced developers and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I'm always talking about is this idea of if you really feel like you're fighting too hard to make the idea that you have work, you probably need to look at it from a different direction, right? So I try to find in software. I try to find what I call the elegant solution, the one that kind of flows for itself, and you're just kind of bringing it along rather than you're trying to shove this rock up a hill and then
Put a square into a circle sort of thing.
You really don't want to be Sisyphus in software development, where you just you're almost there and then you end up down at the bottom again with this rock rolling over you. It's not a fun way to.
So it requires a level of grace instead of brute force.
It does, absolutely. And we talk about brute force in software development all the time, and sometimes brute force is the only solution you have. And sometimes brute force is the right solution, and building some fancy complicated thing is basically like building a Rube Goldberg machine to turn on the tea kettle, and when you can just turn the switch on instead, right?
I used to love making those notes.
Yeah.
There's always like a part in science when you're in elementary school where they help you make one of those.
Yeah.
And it's just like there's so many, you got a toaster that clinks on and it fires a ping pong ball up over to a glass of water and pours out. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So where do you say you draw most of your musical taste and writing style from?
Well, most of what I write sounds the way it does because, well, I guess probably because of my ADHD, because I can't organize other people. So, and I don't want to try and draw them into my spontaneous schedule. It's very frustrating to have to try and to be organized enough to organize other people. I don't want.
Yeah.
I'm in a band, and when I joined the band, I said I will show up, I will work hard, I will give it everything. I don't want to have to organize anything. You guys take care of that, and I will show up on time, and that is my contribution, and that's worked really well for me. But so what do I have? I have my voice, which I think I have a pretty good command of that instrument, and I have an acoustic guitar, which I'm okay at.
Good enough.
I'm good enough to accompany myself with, and I work to get better and make it more interesting. But that's what I have. So that kind of informs what I'm going to write.
Nice.
To a certain extent, whatever I can play on the guitar, I can do. When I started, I did a song a week, sort of. Challenge thing with a bunch of people got together online, and somebody said, okay, here's your prompt, you've got a week to come up with a song for this. It was a lot of fun, and I was primarily writing sort of the chords on the guitar because that's what I have, but then I was building it all in GarageBand and adding extra instruments and what have you. I have all this set up that I don't use very often, but so when I was doing that, I was writing different kinds of songs. I'm writing this, driving rock song, and I'm writing this, there's this one song that I wrote because I saw this clip of this cool African street musicians doing this do 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 kind of thing, and I'm like, oh, I love that, and I just I did this little thing on the guitar. And then I realized there was no way I was going to be able to play that and sing it at the same time, at least not learn it in a week.
Yeah.
So I recorded it on a loop, and then I did the music over that.
Nice.
I built the song over top of that, and that let me so that let me do things that I wouldn't normally do the same way. So is it mellow? It's mostly mellow because that's what acoustic guitar lends you. There,
Yeah.
I certainly have some not so mellow songs, but I like to do a lot of covers. I like to take people's songs and redo them in sort of surprising ways. Like,
That is, I find that's one of the only ways to justify releasing an album with a cover on it. Like, it's one thing to be a cover band because you like to play the songs that you grew up with, that you like to listen to, right? It's another thing to be an artist and then say, I'm going to take this song and play it, because you really need to make it your own.
Yes.
In a way, right? Like, if you just do like the same thing as the other band did, you either have to be perfect in the way that you do that, or it's going to sink. Really bad.
I mean, no shade on Darius Rucker, who has a fantastic voice.
Yep.
I don't even know how he does that. Well, it's built into his voice. It really is. But his cover of Wagon Wheel sounds like Wagon Wheel with lots of country production.
Yeah.
And even I Go Blind, which is a 5440 song.
Yeah.
Which sounds a lot like the 5440 song, just another band doing the same song, right? But it's very distinctive because it's got his voice, right? And almost nobody else sounds like Darius Rucker. But he's not really reinterpreting the song so much, whereas tend to do things like for my band, we do covers straight. We do them as close to the recording as possible because we're a dance band that people want to dance to.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
So and we recently added Short Skirt Long Jacket by Cake.
Oh, I love that song.
I love that song. I was so excited when we decided to do it. I'm singing the lyrics. So in order to learn the lyrics, it's all about repetition, right? And so I find I wanted to play it on the guitar, but there's no way I can go do 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 while I'm trying to sing these lyrics. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of playing the chords, and then I realized, oh, well, I can do it this way. So now I've worked up a version of Short Skirt Long Jacket that's a straight sort of rockabilly blues riff.
Cool. Very cool. Cool.
And so that's sort of what I tend to want to do is do that. I also tend to mash up songs a bit. I just recently did a version of Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. Well, here you go again. You say you want your freedom, and it's a 2-chord song, which is really boring. So I turned it into a 3-chord song with some cool stuff on the just sort of different voicings on the guitar, so that it could really ring. And then as I'm working on it, I'm like, oh, that's totally the same structure as Sleeping Sickness by City and Color. So
okay.
And so, Dallas Green did this song, Sleeping Sickness, which I'd tried to do before, closer to the original, 5 or 6 years ago, which I did, but I wasn't really satisfied with how it sounded on the guitar. And but my favorite verse on it is the one that Gord Downey sings. He actually joins him on this. So the third verse is actually
Gord Downey,
Downey singing on it. And
rest in peace, you God.
I do version. I do Bob Cajun, my version of it. And,
nice.
And every time I do it, I say this one's for Gord.
Good. So, as we should. If we're good Canadian musicians, we owe him. Yeah.
It's amazing how many dead people's music I do, but that's
Hey man, you and everybody else too, right? I mean, that's where the good ones were for a long time.
Yeah. So and again, that's part of creativity is this idea of taking something that exists and pulling in other elements and reforming it into something new and interesting and different. One of the things I love about doing covers this way is because it generates a secondary level of excitement in the listener's brain, because they're hearing something and hopefully you've done it so that it sounds interesting to begin with, and then they recognize the song, and you've suddenly tied into this to these other feelings that they already have about this song. That is, it's almost a bit of cognitive dissonance, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Where they have to actively engage with everything that's going on in order to make that fit with their current model of what that song means.
Yeah.
You know, I do Adele's "Someone Like You," but I do it in 6/8 time, so it sounds very different.
Oh, what? Really?
Oh, it's gorgeous, and of course it's not on piano; it's on guitar, and it's just kind of a nice, kind of strummy thing.
Do you have that on your channel on YouTube there?
I have it. I have it on YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So why am I? Oh, that's really embarrassing. Pardon me.
Oh, faux pas. We got a phone in the studio.
Turn that one right. Turn that right up. Oh my God, that's so embarrassing.
I'm just glad it wasn't me this time.
Do not disturb. There we go. Wow. Well, there we go. Silly me. Anyways, that's 21st century.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I work in film, and the amount of times like my ringer is like on when I walk on the set. And,
you're like,
I have
"Oh,
blown
God."
enough shots to get blackballed from the industry, but for some reason the ADs that hire me still want me on.
No, you
so
must do
it's good.
something right.
Well, you know, ADHD, multifaceted things, right?
There you go.
When you're an AD, you're dealing with everything, so
There you go.
that's kind of how it goes.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing the key word of this podcast coming up quite a bit, creativity. So I'm just gonna go ahead and ask it now. What does creativity mean to you?
What does creativity mean to me? I mean,
And where does it play in your day-to-day life?
creativity is, I mean, well, it literally is creation. It's the drive. It's the desire, or the inclination, or whatever, to create things. Usually new things.
Yep.
I mean, and that's basically it. I mean, technically, the most creative people on the planet are mothers, because they create life.
You are the first man to come on here and say something like that, and it couldn't be more true. Honestly,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, it's. I mean, sure, guys are involved in it, but
Yeah, but they don't got to carry it for the
no,
9
there's
months.
not.
And,
Nowhere
like,
near as much work.
Imagine
involved.
how creative you got to get to still look as good as they do when you're 9 months pregnant. You
Oh,
know?
well,
and to put
and-
in that kind of effort while you're
I
carrying an
mean,
extra 20 pounds around.
The fact that throughout history women have continued to work and do stuff, and Rihanna gets up on stage and does the freaking Super Bowl, and
Yeah.
and
That was I was like second guessing myself when I saw that performance. I was like, she's not pregnant up there. She is pregnant. Oh my God. Like,
there's a good joke, right? Because she's actually, her kid has been on stage for the Super Bowl will have been on stage for the Super Bowl earlier than anybody else ever. Right? There's nobody else.
Point.
There's nobody else that can say, yeah, I played the Super Bowl at -6 months, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Or -3 months or whatever.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah. I mean, creativity is I find it to be such a wonderful thing that we get to experience and use. I think it is like, it's almost key to being human, right?
It is.
Like, I mean, when creativity, it does mean something unique to everybody, but on the grand scale of things, at least in my opinion, I find that it is human. It is like, and as Ryan would say, one of his favorite sayings, and I do love this, he always says, to be creative is to be human, and to be human is to be artist. So at the end of the day, we owe our humanity to the sense of creativity.
Well, I mean, it's very true. I mean, you know, one of the hallmarks of humanity is this idea of modifying our own environment and adapting our environment rather than adapting to our environment.
Yeah.
Sure, we adapt to our environment, absolutely. But humans,
We build our own environments.
We build our own environments. We build our own worlds. We change things
Yeah.
around. We, you know, bears dig holes and gather up straw for their dens, and birds build nests and whatever. But and apparently there's some fish that make some crazy pattern on the seafloor to attract a mate. But
Really?
oh yeah, it's like some sort of crazy mandala. It's actually really fascinating to watch this process if you can look it up. But that's nothing compared to what humans do, right?
Yeah.
Where we literally change anything and everything that we can, and that's really the creativity, right? And
Yeah.
and like I talked about, it's problem solving. Creativity is problem solving. Problem solving is creativity. you have to be creative in order to be able to effectively solve a problem.
Absolutely.
One that you've never seen before
Yeah.
or that you don't already know the solution for.
To think if I take
Right.
this stick and this rock and put them together, I can make a tool. That is creativity
Absolutely.
at its root, right?
Absolutely. Even if I take this stick and drag it through from this creek so I can get water over to this bush over here that's been giving me berries,
Mm-hmm.
right? And make sure that it doesn't dry out. I mean, this is a very creative solution and something that and the guy that said, "Ooh, fire. Let me see what happens when I stick the meat on that." I mean, that's just like
Yeah. I find today there's a lot of people who seem to think that because they don't necessarily write music or take part in the arts, that they don't associate with creativity. I would say, in my opinion, that is the furthest thing from the truth, because as we were just explaining, to be creative is to problem solve, to fix things, to create things, any of that stuff, right? So I'm curious, to you, what careers or I guess occupations are the most creative without seeming stereotypically creative, like outside of the arts?
Well, software is a good example.
Yep.
Right? Everybody thinks software geeks sit there,
Numbers,
numbers, right?
Yeah.
But in fact, any of those engineering type things are very much a creative thing. But, I mean, even, lots of customer service roles and require you to be
Yeah.
incredibly creative in order to be successful at them.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with a different person every single time. So you build these patterns of what works for you in terms of, how do I deal with the table with kids, and how do I deal with, the customer that has lots of special things, right? But you're still dealing with every single person is a uniquely different person, and then you get groups of people and they're all unique, and figuring out how to deal with those effectively so that you don't go crazy and they don't hate you is a very creative.
Yeah.
I owned a restaurant as well for a couple of years.
Oh, really?
So,
Cool. Very
yeah,
cool.
yeah. My wife and I opened up a restaurant, and I learned a heck of a lot doing that. I'll tell you.
Were you culinarily educated as well, or is that
No,
your wife's
no.
side?
I just like to cook.
Cool.
Part of my creativity is cooking stuff. I like to eat. I like the flavors of foods, and so I like to sort of experiment. And I'm one of those. Hey, what have I got in the kitchen today that I'm going to make something?
I'm right there with you, man. I've
Yeah.
always thought that cooking was in its own form of jamming for your mouth and nose.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
It absolutely can be. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting because not everybody is, for any type of creative pursuit, not everybody is as adventurous as other people. I will listen to just about any kind of music.
Mm-hmm.
My wife prefers to listen to the music she's already familiar with.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that she won't discover new things and go, "Oh, I really like this too."
Yeah.
But
She has a template that she likes to stick
well,
to.
yeah. So there's sounds that she likes, and there's even I could go to a show and of somebody I've never heard before doing music I've never encountered before and be fascinated by it. Partly because I can approach it as both just a listener and as somebody who's sort of studying music, and
Yeah.
I'm breaking down what they're doing and that sort of stuff, right? But even before I really did music, well, I guess that's not true. I've always been doing music, but
Before you're doing it seriously, I guess.
Whereas for my wife, she'd much rather go see a performance of somebody, unless they're incredibly engaging, like super great at their craft, essentially. Would much rather go see somebody where she's already familiar with the music, where she's heard the songs before, she knows the voice, or that sort of thing, because that lets her engage more with the performance and really sort of get into it. So different people have different let's say different tolerances for newness, and of course, so being able to work within those strictures is also really interesting too, right? And talking about food, a lot of people like the foods that they like, and they don't want to try the foods that they don't want to try, and so I like everything, but people don't like tomatoes or whatever, and I can't imagine not liking tomatoes, but
Yeah, and I know some people who are like, I used to have a friend when I was younger, and he used to tell me that he was allergic to tomatoes, and I'd be like, "You're allergic to tomatoes? Like, do you like what happens when you?" He's like, "Well, I just get all gaggy, and I get sick to my stomach." I'm like, "Okay, so are you actually allergic to tomatoes, or do you just not like
Just don't like
tomatoes?"
'em.
Just doesn't like them. Is there one? Can you think of a single food or ingredient that you have a hard time with particularly though? Because for me, like I will eat, like I'm a goat. I'll eat anything under the sun, right? But
Yep.
every time they hit the table, I will try them, and it's still the same result, and it's Brussels sprouts for me. I just cannot seem to get myself around them. And everybody I know is like, "Oh, you
That's
just
so
gotta
funny.
try them roasted. You gotta try them Cajun style or
That's so
whatever."
funny.
And it's like, it doesn't matter. Every time I bite them, it's like, sure, I'll get that first bit of like seasoning, which is like delicious. And then that bitterness in the center of that Brussels sprout kicks in, and I just,
Brussels
Can't
sprouts
be-
have a very distinct flavor. It's really
Yeah.
fascinating. So one of the things about me is I have 3 siblings, right?
Cool.
So I'm always trying to get the things that other people don't get, or so I usually order last when I'm at a restaurant with people because I want to order something that nobody else has ordered.
I feel you. Yeah, I feel you there,
and
big time.
and I definitely did that as a kid. I wanted to, order something different and differentiate myself. And I think growing up attention deficit disorder, you can either suffer under the fact that you're going to be different from other people, or you can kind of lean into that.
The individuality of it.
I definitely, found ways to cope by leaning into that and by getting off on the fact that I was the kid that said weird things or liked weird things. Not many 10-year-old boys will say their favorite colors are pink and black, but I was more than happy to say that because nobody else would say no other boy would say their favorite color was pink. So I was challenging that idea. But so, one of the things that every kid dislikes is Brussels sprouts. And so, I mean, and I like food anyways. So I was like, oh yeah, Brussels sprouts are awesome. I do like Brussels sprouts, but I really leaned into the liking Brussels sprouts thing. So, but is there one food that I mean, so the only thing that really I try to avoid is mixing dairy and fruit.
Okay.
Especially acidic fruit. Like,
So you're not a strawberry milkshake guy?
I'm not a strawberry milkshake guy. I eat. I like to buy these little yogurt cup things, right? And my least favorite is the strawberry, but I usually eat them 2 at a time. So I'll grab a strawberry and something else, and I'll eat the strawberry first.
Yeah.
Because I don't like to waste food.
Yeah.
So I'll eat the strawberry and then I'll eat something else. So I've gotten to the point where strawberry yogurt's okay for me. But I would not normally choose a strawberry whatever over maybe a blueberry or peach or something like that. But I mean, basically, it's like nobody ever says yes, I want milk and orange juice mixed together.
Oh God.
Okay,
Yeah, no.
but that's basically dairy and fruit.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. So when people come out and they're, oh, look, I've made this lovely trifle, there's layers of whipped cream and fruits and I'm like,
It just doesn't work
no,
for you.
maybe I'll take a little bit to be polite and I'll probably eat the lady fingers that are in there or whatever. But I generally try to avoid anything involving dairy and fruit, which means that I don't usually have whipped cream on my pie.
Why Orange Julius was always such a mystery to me. It's like, how does it taste this good when it's got 2 things that just should not go together in the drink?
Lots of sugar.
Yeah, I guess so, right? Maybe that's why I haven't had it in a while. That's a good point. So, I mean, picture yourself on like Friday night, you're off work, you got something tasty. What do you normally like? Like, what's one of your go-to like proteins and stuff that you like to like combine with other things? Because obviously, if you like to cook, you're not necessarily a guy who follows a specific recipe as much as you think. Like, well, I've got this. It'll probably go really well with like a steak or something like that, right? So, what's your favorite go-to for that? Like, what really gets your creative juices flowing when it comes to cooking?
Well, sausage is always fun.
Sausage?
Because there's so many different flavors of styles of sausage and so if I see a different sausage at the supermarket, I'll go, oh, let's get that, and we'll start with that, and maybe I'll just throw it in a pasta. Actually, one of my favorite things is to have have rice, which I'll usually do up with, some kind of soup stock and sautéed onions and get some flavor in there. And then, do like a salad with some of the rice on it, and then hot, freshly cooked sausage pieces.
Yeah.
Right, and then just drizzle. I go with the fat free Italian from Kraft because there's like 5 calories in a tablespoon, which literally means I can empty half the bottle onto it.
Yeah,
and it's like there's no calories at all.
I do like it saucy.
Yeah. So just kind of go with that, and I usually always have spinach in my salad, and so of course a little bit of warmth with spinach really brings out those flavors and stuff. So that's always cool. But sausage is great because it's meat, it's flavorful, it's it's a little bit fatty, a little bit salty.
Already got the seasonings in there. Yeah,
it's got some flavor. Somebody's done something with it already, and then you can just go from there.
As a descendant of a heavily German family, I can appreciate your love for sausage. My Oma used to make all kinds of different types of wurst all the time with like rotkohl and just all the good stuff, spatulas, all that. It was wonderful. So when you're, I'm just trying to build an image for whoever's watching this to kind of a peek inside of your life, like in one of these moments where you're being creative outside of music. So you've got, you've went and picked a sausage. Let's say you got a nice kielbasa or something, right? You're making something up. What do you have playing on the stereo most of the time? Like what kind of music helps you to like really focus in when you're cooking? What's your go-to guy?
So I have a Google Home Mini sitting in the kitchen. So so it really depends, right? I mean, sometimes I'll be like, "Hey Google, play music to make dinner by," right? Or play music for an autumn evening, right? And see what comes up. And sometimes there's a song that I want to hear, or an artist that I want to hear, especially stuff that I listened to when I was a teen in my 20s that I haven't listened to in a long time. Hey Google, play The Cure. Hey, go play the Violent Femmes, right? Or
cool.
or it could be anything. I mean, I could say, "Hey Google, play me the soundtrack to The Music Man."
Nice. Yeah,
because I was in that in high school, so I know all the music. I mean, I know the music. I used to listen to musical stuff a lot. So.
Oh, really? Eh?
Oh, yeah.
That's one I never managed to get my head around. Like, I do have respect for musical performances, like, but as far as like films and stuff like that, I always have a hard time with musicals. I like Mamma Mia, probably one of the only ones I've actually really do enjoy watching that, and I guess Moulin Rouge was a pretty decent one.
So, I mean, it's really interesting, right? Because a lot of times musicals as a movie aren't necessarily great movies.
Yeah.
But the people that are dedicating themselves to writing all the music for a musical are really talented people. Right.
Like, who's the gentleman who wrote Rent? We were just talking about him.
Right. It's whatever his name is. There's a great sort of movie based on his life.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield.
Andrew Garfield.
Yeah.
Loved watching that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, actually, I have a lot of respect for Andrew Garfield now.
I'm gonna have to check that out. I can't remember what the name of the movie is.
It's really, really good. But yeah, so Rent's a perfect example of, the movie itself was okay.
Yeah.
Had a lot of talent in it.
But the Broadway,
listening to the soundtrack. I mean, I bought the CD. I listened to the soundtrack. I can sing along to the. I probably can't sing any of these songs, but like off the top of my head. But I could easily sing along to any of these soundtracks. Like I can remember being up on a ladder, cleaning my eaves troughs and playing in my headphone.
Oh, really? Nice.
Whatever that song is that they sing in the cafe and. All about being different and cool and whatever. So, so I mean, so musical soundtracks for me, I mean, and my sister is also very musical, and she's 2 years older than me. So, and she was really into musicals. So we listened to them a lot on the record player growing up. So I know all of the, I can actually probably sing along word for word to all of Jesus Christ Superstar because we listened to it so much when I was a kid.
Nice, yeah.
So, yes.
Cool, very cool.
But so I mean, musicals are are incredibly varied.
Mm-hmm.
They present a lot of different styles. Even the older ones like the Music Man or Andy Get Your Gun or that sort of stuff.
Singing
I mean,
in
they
the
may
Rain.
sound a little hokey, but they weren't hokey for the time necessarily,
Yeah.
right? And again, there's a lot of artistry, there's a lot of creativity going on there to produce these things. And yes, they all have their own genre, and it's almost like they've the modern ones, a lot of them have distilled themselves to almost a Disney-esque sound, right?
Yeah. I think that's what kind of gets me with it is like a lot of the modern musicals, at least that make it to film and stuff, they all have a very similar sort of like showmanship kind of vibe to the music that
Well,
they play,
and yes, and I mean, there's especially I notice this especially with female singers. Vanessa Hudgens is probably a great example of that kind of singer. They are all aiming for almost the same kind of sound. Partly because the enunciation required in order to come across properly on stage is there, and that kind of informs. It used to be they all sounded like Ethel Merman. The reason why Ethel Merman was huge is because she had this huge voice, and they didn't have little tiny flesh tone microphones on their thing. You had to be able to hear it in the back, and she could be heard everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So they sound kind of like that. It works because it's dramatic, right? So it's a way of and you hear it even in in cartoons like Frozen and that sort of stuff, right? I mean, they've got this. You hear Idina Menzel sing when she's not doing show tune stuff, and I mean, she's stupidly good.
Yeah.
She's so good that she can go into this show mode and even still not sound quite like that, right? But a lot of them are really, they're aiming for a certain thing because they know that's what works and because that's what they hear and they like.
Yeah.
I think guys do it too to a certain extent, but I think that for whatever reason it really kind of stands out a little more with female singers.
Do you think that's more because of the pitch and tone of their voice, or
they could very well be? Because the theatrical males, they all kind of sound a little, no one plays like Gaston, no one slays like Gaston.
I remember watching Pierce Brosnan just try his hardest in Mamma Mia, and that's the first thing I thought of is like he's trying to be like Gaston right now because it's the same. They've got that. You can tell they're singing from like the bottom of their chest. They've got that whole like
they're trying to get that resonance, and again, and that's informed by the whole theatrical thing that's coming through, right? So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that being in a theater when you're not like this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The microphones change the way people sing. Obviously.
Big time. Yeah. I mean, like you almost have to go to an opera to see anybody who's mastered the actual projection of their voice like that. You know? Like because like it used to be. That's why theaters were built the way they were. Is they were to amplify the voices of whoever was on there, and what was it? First microphone. I'm not sure when the first microphone was made for singing and stuff, but let's just say 1908 or some stuff, right? And then from that point forward, it's like the structure that you are performing in becomes less and less relevant, and the technology that you are using to perform becomes more and more needed.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that happened not just with microphones. We look at the electrification of music. It used to be you needed a big band in order to fill up that space, right? And now you just need. You don't even need the giant Marshall stack. You just need a little speaker
and a good mic. Yep.
And then let the tech guys take care of it.
There's a lot to be said for someone who can do both. Like it's almost like it's forgotten art. Like
well, it really is. It's interesting. I did a lot of choirs and choral stuff growing up.
That's cool. So you've been quite musical most of your life, then.
I literally have been doing music from before I can remember.
And did you ever study theory or anything like that, or is it more just?
I studied. I took band and choir and stuff all through high school, so I learned
Okay, cool.
that much theory, and I've learned a little more just by absorption. Like I
mean,
said, I'm a human Google, so anything that I can learn about stuff, I will, and I build it into that model.
And a full high school career involving band the whole way through. That is like more education in music theory than 90% of the population will ever have, right?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I can read music still.
That's
I
cool,
I was in a choir, just a community choir a few years ago. And yeah, I mean, it didn't take me very long to be able to, get back into just, reading what was going on and having the less experienced members actually relying on me to be able to follow the tune properly, and they would just listen to me. So
I used to be able to read sheet music up until I got into high school. When I started playing guitar, actually, when I was 14, it had been a couple of years since I took the recorder class in elementary school and stuff, where they teach you how to read the sheet music.
Yep.
And I can still understand what it is when I'm reading it, but to translate that to where and how I'm playing my guitar is still in almost entirely a mystery to me. I read a lot of tablature, right?
Mhm.
And after playing long enough, for certain genres and songs, I can pick up by ear, but they have to be relatively simplistic. I couldn't go and listen to, say, Black Betty, Ram
Mhm.
Jam, right? I know I can understand where they're playing, but to really know how to get those riffs down and stuff,
Right.
I'm not going to be able to just look at sheet music or hear it and play it. I'm going to have to see the tablature or watch the guy's fingers as they go, right?
Interesting.
Because it's one thing to be able to play throughout the correct keys and stuff, right? But to get the same fills and runs as those musicians get, because depending on the recording, the performance, what mood they're in, even
it can be
different entirely. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. So I recently I play bass. I played bass back in high school.
Nice.
And so I have a bass that I rarely play, but I love playing bass. It's such a
It is
so much fun to play. It's creative. It's very creative in its own way.
Yeah.
Within the strictures of what you're trying to do. But yeah. So and so this band was looking for a bass player, and they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this, Like a Stone by Audioslave. And we're doing 3 Days Grace, and what's that Foo Fighters one, Everlong, and that sort of stuff, and all stuff I'd never played bass on before. But so I'm listening to them, I'm playing along, and it's a lot of fun. And so for me, just listening can translate into where that goes, for sure.
Bass guitar is I kind of compare it to golf in a sense. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I've always viewed bass, and I feel like this is the same with golf. With golf, anyone can go pick up a club and play, and you'll hit a nice shot. If you play a whole 18 holes, it's almost impossible that you'll do the whole 18 without at least hitting one shot where you're like, wow, that was pretty cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a bass guitar, it's almost the same. But to get really good at it is probably one of the most advanced forms of instrument to play out there. You look at, say, the Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers, and the technical prowess that he actually has.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane. But then you've got guys like the bassist from ZZ Top, for example. He'll just,
sure,
tip around with it, and he's just playing on the root notes for the most part. And you'll see him play these runs once in a while. For me, I always loved bass because I could pick it up. I could figure out where to put my fingers quick enough because all I had to do was follow the guitarist's index finger for the most part and find the root notes.
Right.
And then the other nice part about it, as compared to guitar or any other instruments that play in a higher scale of pitch, your mistakes aren't hurt as much.
No.
You can funk up a little bit on a bass and still carry on without people noticing. If you're playing a guitar and you're getting up there in a solo, or even if your chords are hitting wrong and you're muting some strings accidentally, people notice that right off the bat.
They do.
Yeah.
So that's why you need to repeat it so you can make it sound like it was deliberate.
Yeah. That's a good strategy.
The guitar player for my band is absolutely fantastic, a guy named Peter Robinson, and we talk about that all the time. If you make a mistake, just lean into it, do it again, do it a third time, and people go, "Oh, you meant to do that. That's really cool."
He's so artistic, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
So what about I heard you mention the Foo Fighters earlier there. Have you been a fan of Dave Grohl for a long time then as an individual artist as well, or is it
Well,
more just
I mean, Dave's a very cool guy.
I would venture to say he's probably the busiest and most successful individual in the entire rock genre these days.
Could very well be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I grew up in the '80s. When Smells Like Teen Spirit came out.
Yeah.
That was holy cow. That was
Nirvana. Yeah. Nirvana was a game changer.
Looking
sure.
back on it sounds great, but yes, Nirvana literally changed the sound of music.
Yeah. It was that 90s grunge wave. Like was it like 89, 90 is kind of when it started picking up, and then I guess 97, 98 is kind of when it started to shallow out a bit.
Yeah, well, I don't know the exact history, but yeah, I mean, definitely from my experience living through it, Smells Like Teen Spirit, and then the whole Nirvana thing was like, well, okay, now we have stuff that people want to listen to on the radio, and this is really cool, and then that sort of informed everything, and everybody said, oh yeah, so then all the other bands like STP and anybody else that fit into that grunge feel, mostly from the West Coast, got to be paid attention to. They could have been grinding at it for years, but now we had this thing where, hey, we can make money off this. I mean, that's
and then Q Creed and Q Pearl Jam and like
sure, yeah,
absolutely.
And opening up those options for these guys that want to make this kind of music, and then that played itself out, and then Eminem and Dr. Dre and all that really started bringing forward the sort of the more of the hip hop
vibes,
stuff and that sort of stuff, and and then in the early 2000s, then we started getting back into rock and roll with sort of I may call it more of a pop rock thing with bands like Coldplay and stuff.
Lenny Kravitz, man.
Lenny Kravitz. Oh man, that
just like music and sex god.
Wow.
100%.
So I mean, if you ask me who my inspirations are, or who I listen to a lot, I mean, Prince is probably number one. So when you want to talk about rock and roll and sex, I saw a great description of him the other day as a songwriter as somebody who can take something that is incredibly lewd and rude and still make it sound like it's art.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Kiss is just
everything.
Yeah. Oh, and I was I had a brief stint as a karaoke host when I was younger, back in Kamloops. And I used to do this. I had this method. Whenever we'd open a night up, a lot of times you can just, like most karaoke companies, you'll set it up and you'll just put the book out, wait for someone to come up or whatever. Right? I always made a point of getting up on the stage, giving a little welcoming speech. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Halsted Pub. We're here to give you guys a good night. Please feel free to access our music, yada, yada. And then I would pick anything that I just had never sang before, ever tried, right?
Yeah.
One of my go-tos was Prince, Kiss, right?
Yeah.
And at first it was like I'd go up there, and the reason I'd pick music like that is so that I could suck in front of all these people who were worried about getting up and sucking. But if the guy who hosts the night is up there doing it over and over again and sounding terrible, then you got nothing to worry about.
Exactly.
Right? Because nobody goes to karaoke because they think it's the next American Idol, right? You're going up there to try and feel as close as you can to your closest rock star, right? So Prince was always like, and I hadn't really listened to much of his music before I started doing that. But once I started learning how to falsetto and stuff and getting the you don't have to be beautiful, like that whole vibe, it almost opened a whole new aspect of what I thought was worth looking into for music, Yep. I used to think I grew up in a pretty musical household. My dad was into Motown and the classics and stuff like that. My mom was big Heartland rock girl, like Tom Petty, all that stuff, right? And my brother I had a brother 9 years older than me. He's a drummer, really into punk, metal, all the fast, hard stuff. Cool. Led me into a kind of I want to say I held a personal stigma against music like Prince, thinking that people who could falsetto and sing higher like that and stuff was just like pansy music or something.
Right.
When I was a fragile man.
Sure,
you know?
yeah, absolutely,
You know? Yeah,
absolutely.
and then like once I hit the karaoke thing, like, and I can't believe it took me being a karaoke host to figure this out. But like I started understanding that like these people sound this way because it is in its own form like an extremely talent-driven method to go for.
It is incredibly difficult to actually sing in a falsetto voice like that and sell it properly.
Yeah.
I generally don't do it. I have a very clear falsetto and with quite a good range on it, but I don't sound like Prince and I don't sound like Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
And you know, it's so I save it for you know, the little surprises in a couple of songs.
Yeah.
Generally the softer ones. But yeah, no, Prince is but anybody like that, right? Prince and Jagger and I mean the amazing thing is how popular the sort of the falsetto-ish, the modern falsetto voice of people like Charlie Puth, who are all singing up this way high thing, and it's really interesting. I saw him doing an interview with what's his dude, the shock jock with the long dark hair.
Shock jock.
Yeah, he was a host of America's Got Talent. Or it was, you know, he's in New York. It's
I could tell
Leonard or Howard Stern.
There you go. Yeah.
Anyways, he's in an interview with Howard Stern, and he's talking about, you know, how cool he hit his piano, and he's talking about how cool Elton John is and Billy Joel and all this kind of stuff. And he's singing all these things, and he's kind of going through, and I know he's just riffing on it, right? His falsetto doesn't actually sound all that great.
Yeah.
But he's a great producer, and he knows how to take that and make it really work for him.
Yeah.
So it's the heavily produced falsetto actually can work really well too. So yeah, I mean, but falsetto is a hard thing to work with. I mean, and even, you know, women, you don't actually hear women singing in their head voice in the female version of a falsetto very often in popular music because
they can get up there.
And people don't necessarily know how to
interpret something that high.
Yeah, you know, and it really and it really has to be. And again, even for them, I mean, it's really easy to get up there, but it's much harder to actually make it sound like something that people want to listen to.
And to move into it from your standard singing range into your falsettos without that.
Oh yeah. Well, fighting that break is an art unto itself.
Whitney Houston is a pro at that. You know, she was incredible for that kind of talent, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So when you think back onto like your influences and stuff, I can tell you have like a incredibly dynamic plethora of people that you look to for like your musical influences and stuff. Which one would you say you actually heard or saw and you thought, I want to be able to replicate that first? Like which one of them really drew in your need or your want to be a musical artist?
Elvis.
That's not a bad choice.
So when I was a kid, who's your favorite musician? Elvis.
Yeah.
Elvis was, you know, I used to ride my bike around and I called, my bike was red and I called it Hot Dog, but I would ride around singing, "You ain't nothing but a hot dog," riding all the time. I mean, I'm like 8 or 9 or whatever, right? So definitely Elvis, even though I didn't really know much about him, but the Elvis was even larger than life, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it was so definitely the whole Elvis thing, and you know, even just like that whole early rock and roll, sort of country infused, rockabilly infused kind of, you know,
blues, all of it, like
all of that comes into this amazing performer package of Elvis. So if we go first, it's Elvis. When you were talking before you said first, I thought about the best concert I've ever seen, which was Damien Rice at McCaw Hall in Seattle, which is an opera house.
Really?
I love Damien Rice. I discovered Damien Rice, and I'm like, oh my god, I just gotta listen to everything.
Okay, so this is one musician that I have to admit I'm not familiar.
Oh, so Damien Rice is Irish.
Okay.
He was part of an Irish band called I can't remember what they were called, and he got hired. They got signed to like a 4-song EP, and they wanted to do an album, and he wanted to write music, and the record label said, "Nope, we hold your contract, and you're not releasing an album."
What?
So they broke up, and they said, "Screw that."
Fucking record labels, man.
And he started writing on his own, and then he made up a demo, and he sent it to somebody that he knew in the industry, and they were like, "Okay, well, we really like this. Gonna send you some recording equipment. You're gonna record it all sort of at home or whatever, and here's some money to do it. Not a huge amount of money, but he created this first album, and it's mostly him and his guitar and a woman named Alison Hannigan and her cello.
Okay, we're back from the break. Earl, so I imagine currently you're playing the genre that you like enjoy the most, or like some genres that you enjoy the most in
Sure.
like a fusion with the band that you're in and on your solo act and stuff.
Yep.
In another life, what do you think you'd be playing outside of the genres that you're into now? Like what I guess what genre has been the most fascinating to you that you've never really had the ability to or resources to be able to practice?
That's a good question. I mean, I like jazz. I listened to a lot of jazz and big band.
You got to be really smart for jazz.
Swing when I was growing up, and well, you do. It's really interesting. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a jazz musician, a jazz instrument player.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a great. I'll never be a great instrument player of any type because I have substandard fine motor skills. But I love singing jazz, and you know, my understanding, my interaction with music is very much instinctive, right? You know, I taught myself how to sing harmonies when I was, 9 or 10 or something, because I realized that you could, so I started doing it.
And so did you go by like when you first felt that you hit a harmony, did you feel that pitch resonance kind of match up with whatever you're doing?
Well, yeah, it was really, I mean, it was really just a question of realizing that, sort of people were singing harmonies, and if they were doing that, and I could do that too, and then just doing it and sort of instinctively knowing where the music, where the notes were that were available. Like, I mean, it's really funny because I look back in it and I understand more sort of the theory behind what I'm doing and how I'm doing that, and even the physics behind that when you talk about sort of the resonance points. But really, it was just I sort of instinctively absorbed, sort of how music was structured and how people did harmonies, and I was just sort of doing that. I wasn't just, singing the harmonies that other people that I'd heard on recordings or whatever, and I wasn't doing, just always doing the third or whatever. It was just, here I am. I'm going to fit song notes in here that fit and make sense, and of course it feels good right away when you're singing harmonies. It did to me anyway, so it was self-reinforcing. But I didn't realize that wasn't something that everybody would naturally end up doing, because we had a friend of the family over, and we were singing something, and I was singing harmonies to it, and she just said, "Earl, that's amazing." And I said, "What?" "Well, that harmony, people can't do that." And I was like, I didn't know that. And I think I was 10 or 11 or something. It had never occurred to me that it wasn't something that everybody does. And I've since discovered that, in fact, it's not even something that every singer does. I've had conversations with singers. I go to a lot of open mics and stuff. And a lot of singers who are very good singers never do harmonies. They never really even approach the idea of doing harmonies because of how they conceptualize the music or whatever. So they're really not very good at doing harmonies. They don't feel comfortable doing harmonies at all. So, and I realize this because, I'd be sort of singing along harmonies to something and occasionally somebody would say, "Oh, wow, that was great harmonies. It's so good to hear somebody else who can do harmonies." They'd realize that most people don't do harmonies, for even singers. And I just assume that every singer could do harmonies. And maybe it's because, like my sister, who's excellent, she studied music and education at university and became a music teacher, and she's an excellent singer, and she did I probably started doing harmonies because she was doing harmonies, and I just assumed that everybody could. But apparently they don't, because they go in different ways. But so for me, my understanding of music and jazz music, because I've listened to a lot of jazz music, is very much instinctual. So I just kind of understand where the music's going and where it's supposed to be going. I can remember doing choral stuff in high school and, having to do some harmony and a couple times and really not nailing it, feeling very frustrated until I realized where that fit in with the rest of everything that was going on. Because when you're first learning songs, right, choral pieces, and you're learning your part, you're really just looking at your notes. I need to hit these notes. You're not listening to the whole thing. And I can remember being very frustrated, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, this feels weird, but it's because it's the major seventh underneath the thing, because I was singing bass parts. And so it feels really weird and not normal. But as soon as I understood where this was in the entire chord and what was going on, and where this was going to lead into this thing, I was like, oh, this is easy. I can do this now, no problem at all. Cool. So, So for me, for jazz, it would be just be a chance to do some music in structures that I don't normally get, like, because I love jazzy chords and I love all that kind of stuff.
They do have a certain je ne sais quoi to them. There
is what's the joke about rock musicians play a small number of chords to a large number of people, and jazz musicians play a large number of chords to a small number of people.
Yeah.
I mean, jazz is very much the fine art, the modern art of music.
Yeah.
Right. It's modern art is something that you or modern dance is something that you really have to experience and educate in order to be able to understand enough of it to even get there. And the average person doesn't get exposed to that, isn't necessarily even want to because they're not attracted to that sort of thing. So it can be really it's less accessible.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I think that jazz is kind of like, it's almost in the same realm as like heavy metal in a way, that it's like built upon almost as if it's a science, like jazz is a constant progression to like more and more advanced levels of jazz music. And with like, say, death metal or something like that, maybe not all bands, obviously, because there are some that just frankly sound like crap, but there are others who are just like so technically sound and tight and fast. Well, it's all about moving that bar higher and higher.
It's really interesting how metal transformed into this thing that was really about technical brilliance and a lot of math.
Yeah. Oh,
right.
Fuck yeah.
And interesting time changes and very tight, rhythms and all that sort of stuff. And even keys, or modes that people don't normally, Phrygian mode and stuff like that.
Iodian and Lydian.
Who does Phrygian? Nobody except soundtrack composers and metal bands, right?
Specifically Finnish melodic death metal bands. Like there's so many like subgenres involved in it and stuff.
Yeah.
There really is. I find that's the commonality there, though, is that they're both in search of consistent improvement on technical prowess with it. With that being said, actually, where was I going to go with this now? I was going to ask you which instrument, in your experience, do you feel would be an awesome one to learn how to play, but B, one that's always been too technically intimidating for you to try to get around to?
Well, I just recently started taking drum lessons because I'm lucky as a musician that I also have a very good sense of rhythm.
Yeah.
Which serves me well as a guy strumming a guitar.
Yeah.
And because I can, strum and make it kind of, add some rhythms and stuff that's very interesting. And I'm always tapping stuff and whatever, and give me a conga drum and I can make people go, oh, wow, that was so amazing, right? And it's just because
it just comes, it kind of comes hand in hand with the ADD thing, the attention deficit. You're always
so there is
right?
potentially that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many people that regularly play drum patterns on their teeth, but
right here, yeah,
absolutely. But it's absolutely one of those things that it's actually a very safe way to self-stim because people can't hear it.
Yeah, exactly. I've been fighting myself this whole podcast not to do it for the sake of Ricardo's ears, but like I'm constantly clicking my teeth. Yeah, that was the funniest part about
thinking about it.
Yeah,
I gotta stop.
Yeah, that was the most intriguing part about a late diagnosis for me. Like I didn't know I had anything along the lines of ADHD until like literally January of this year. I turned 30 2 months later, and all of a sudden, it's like I started seeing these social media videos of people talking about what it's like to live with ADHD and stuff. And like, if you click your teeth to the rhythm or beat of a song, it's definitely one of the main symptoms because you're constantly trying to stimulate yourself. And like, in that aspect, it kind of made a lot of sense to me that like I never took drum lessons per se, but my older brother was always a drummer, and he's also extremely on the hyperactive side of attention deficit as well. But he's been a drummer since as long as I can remember. And honestly, like, and I mean this truthfully, Jeffrey, you are probably one of the most advanced and efficient drummers I have ever seen. Like he's incredible. I've seen the guy go from playing like a full like match to match of Neil Peart on YYZ to like just hitting reggae and jazz and like everything. And I think it's something about just feeling that physical stimuli that you do with playing the drums and rhythm that like
that may very well be right. It's I mean, and yes, exactly. It absolutely engaging that physicalness is great. One of the yes, I have lots of thoughts about this, but I'm trying to avoid having them all come out at the same time.
It's the hardest part.
Stay on target. Yeah. Stay on target.
Yeah, man. When it comes to drums, I think it's definitely there's nothing. It's one thing to be able to play an instrument because of picking up on melodies and keys and things like that. It's a whole other world to be focused entirely on rhythm. And I think that's where drumming is really set apart from everything else, like percussion instruments in general. But to be a good, like, traditional, like, 5-piece or 3-piece drummer, even as I had mentioned before, like in like metal music, for example, we never had double kick bass drums until that genre really started taking off. And now you've got guys who can literally replicate the sound of an airplane motor with their feet just by the RPMs. It's wild.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting taking these drum lessons and engaging new parts of my coordination, because I'm so used to using just my hands that it's interfering with my ability to do the kick drum.
Yeah.
Right? Like I keep wanting to do that kick hit with my snare drum hand instead of or whatever, and it's really and so programming myself to programming that muscle memory to say, okay, so this part belongs to my foot, and again dividing it up and slicing it up into the pieces. And of course, once I find the less I think about it, the better.
Yeah.
Right. I actually, because I was, we were doing "Shook Me All Night Long," which nice. I do with my band. So I sing, so I know all the words to it.
Yeah.
So doonch, doonch, doonch,
yeah.
doonch, and so one of the things I was, I can actually sing along to this. And as soon as I was singing along to it, because I didn't really have to think about the lyrics because I know it so well.
Yeah.
But that loosened up things enough that I wasn't really thinking about where my foot was supposed to go, and it just let it happen. And so then it actually flowed a lot better, right? And so it's this idea of you know, I mean, it's just like anything else. When you're trying to do something physical or mechanical, and you want to get to the point where you don't have to think about it anymore, because your conscious control of it is never going to be as good as your subconscious control of it because there's too much extra layers in the way, right? You know, my son's a ballet dancer, and
oh my God, he must be athletic as hell. You can't dance ballet without being like absolutely just nimble and flexible as hell.
Absolutely incredible physique on him and all the ballet dancers. It's just no. I mean, he's a good-looking guy, but he could have absolutely been a model anytime he wanted, just because he was so fit all the time. What was it? He said he burned something like, when they were actively rehearsing and stuff, it was easily 10,000 calories a day.
10,000 calories a day?
10,000 calories a day.
I mean, I don't doubt it. Like, considering the amount of strength, coordination, and flexibility and balance that goes into ballet, like it is, I find it so funny that it has such a feminine connotation to it, right? Ballet as a whole, because you
culturally, yes,
you
absolutely.
picture a ballerina or something. It's almost like cheerleading in that sense, right? But the most athletic people of that area of like arts, like if you're in dance and you're a ballerina, aside from maybe being like a top of the line break dancer, you're not going to find athletes as top tier as ballet dancers.
No.
Same with like cheerleading. It's like you're gymnastics practically, right? And that is just on its own. You are literally catapulting people into the air and like doing flips and like all of this stuff in coordination and timing, and there's so much to it.
Sure. I mean, the cheerleading, modern American cheerleading is at the same level as Chinese acrobatics.
Yeah, or Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
You know, like
it's and it's crazy that these are just, you know, a lot of them are 19, 20-year-olds that even haven't even necessarily, I don't know. I mean, they're not even getting the same level of training as like Olympic athletes, but they're doing stuff that's as dangerous as Olympic athletes. It's crazy.
Like you get chucked 15 feet in the air and you're supposed to rely on these people to catch you. And you have to complete a double backflip with a 360 in it somehow before they catch you, and hope that you're in the right angle, that you don't end up kicking one of them in the face.
Yeah. Cheerleading is an extreme sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've got a few nieces. I haven't seen them in a long time, but Shiloh, if you ever see this, I still think of you and I love you. A sister of mine, she lives in Alberta. She's got 4 kids, and her oldest boy's in football, and I don't know if it's both of her daughters, but one of them is in cheerleading. And I guess Alberta's cheerleading programs are pretty up there.
Oh yeah.
They went to Florida this year for like the North American Championships or something like that. Man, just wild.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So your son is in ballet. Is he a musician as well?
No. So he can sing.
Yeah.
You know, when he went to the Royal Winnipeg Ballet School, and they one of the things they try to teach is musicality, and so you know, they have them all in a choir in order to. But he said, you know, the teacher was always relying on me to actually be able to sing well, right?
And do you mind if I ask, not to cut you off, but the term musicality, just for others who might not be entirely well educated on the subject, myself included, I have an idea of what musicality means, but like when you say it, can you give us like a bit of a explanation of that?
Musicality in the context of dance. So dance is a very physical thing, right? And you can be very good at mechanically doing the moves that you need to do and still not be interesting to watch because you potentially don't have the artistry. It's like it's almost like the difference between having somebody be up on stage and imitate somebody pitch perfect, and then that same person doing it, but having whatever little extra bit that makes it utterly engaging.
Okay.
Right.
So it's knowing how to engage with the music in
well,
a sense?
yeah.
Or?
So right. So when it comes to dance and ballet, because it's a very physical thing, you can attract people that are very coordinated and very physical, but don't have a lot of or haven't worked on their sense of artistry and stuff. So one of those things is because you're on stage, it's a dramatic art, so you have to be able to emote and dramatize, and some people are very good at that. But because you're also doing this to music, you have to, ideally, you have to really feel the music and engage with engage with the music through dance as music.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody's good at that, or not everybody's ever even really paid attention to that. So they get them singing and engaging with the music that way in order to just feel how music feels outside of the context of dance. So then they can bring that in. So that's the musicality is because again, if you've ever watched dance that doesn't feel like it's fitting the music properly, even though it's technically amazing, that can be off-putting or not very interesting, right?
If the movements don't quite match the rhythm of it,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even just the intent of the music, right?
Mm-hmm.
My son was with Ballet BC, they are modern ballet, and it's very much a modern sort of kind of style, and so very very avant-garde music as well. So, but even still, making sure that everything sort of fits together and works together. And I see it on stage, and I see some very technically talented people, but they're not. To me, they're not getting as much of the feel of the music through their dance. They've forgotten that, or they're focused on something else. So when all three of those things come together, the technical ability along with the musicality and the dramatic portion of that all come together, then you get something really amazing. And that's very similar to performing as a performer on stage,
Mm-hmm.
right? Lots of people can sing, but they're not necessarily great front people for a band, for example, because they're focusing on the singing, or they're technically very good, but they're not engaging with the audience, or maybe they're not engaging with the music, or both, right? So there's more than just the technical brilliance, and or having a guitar player everybody can watch a guitar player go no, but if the guitar player is going like this, then they're really excited, right?
Yeah.
They're flailing around and whatever, and they're doing the stank face or whatever happens to be. Anything that does that,
the stank face,
people, every band needs a front man,
mm-hmm.
a front person, and that's usually the singer, but not always. Sometimes sometimes there's more than one. Talking about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, they have two front people. they have Anthony, and they have Flea.
Yeah, Flea is just fucking wild, man.
He is. Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of frontmen, actually, since we're on that topic, well, we're not on it, but I'm gonna divert it a little bit here. I know you already mentioned Prince, so we'll leave him out of the conversation. But as far as and I want to keep it on bands here, not solo acts.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say frontmen, top three people that come to mind.
Well, Prince.
Yeah.
Well, so Mick Jagger, I saw him in Toronto at the Sky Dome or whatever.
That must have been amazing.
We were 12 rows in the front, and I mean, and this was 20 years ago, but he still hasn't slowed down. I mean, he literally, there's a reason why he stays skinny, and it's not drugs. Maybe it was, but it's not now. It's because he doesn't stop moving.
Yeah, he's always dancing, always moving.
But he recognizes that it is his job to keep things interesting.
Yeah.
And he's very, 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 very practiced at it. And he's still not fake.
Yeah.
He still goes 150,000% on stage.
Cool.
So Jagger, absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm a big fan of Blue Rodeo. I've seen them probably 20 times.
Nice.
And they have two frontmen.
Okay.
Right, because they have two lead singers.
Okay.
And both of them are understated, but both of them are very good. Jim Cuddy is he's a tall guy, he's a good looking guy, and he sings sort of the higher, sort of poppier kind of stuff, and he really just stands there and smiles and just gives.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And Greg Keeler, he writes songs like Dark Angel and stuff like that, but when he's doing it, he's doing it. He's not phoning it in, and it's interesting to watch both of them step back. I think Greg probably chews Neckarettes on stage or something all the time. He's always chewing gum, and I don't know how he doesn't choke on it. Because I chewed gum in a gig once, and I almost choked on it.
Yeah,
After that, I was like,
I don't know how people can do anything aside from focus on chewing gum. Like for me, walking and chewing gum is hard enough, So that's two bands. What's one more? Give me one more.
Oh man. Who else have I seen that? Well, Elton John.
Oh, okay, but that's a solo act. Gotta be a band. Come on, give me a band.
Okay, a band.
Yeah.
Do I listen to a lot of? Have I watched a lot of bands? That's a really good question. Well, I saw Kim Mitchell.
Okay.
On stage. He's a whole band. I mean, he's a guy, but he's a band. Yeah. And again, tall guy, gets up there. This was back in the 80s. Big hair, loud clothes. I think he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and stuff, but just absolutely, I am on stage. I am giving you. I mean, and that's what it is. I mean, Prince is in a class of his own.
Yeah.
Because he's he's like James Brown, right? James Brown is a great performer as well.
Oh, God, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And James Brown definitely informed Prince's style. But they are both in a class of their own because they are they're like a white hot fire of music drive, right, and drive to perfection, right. But the other ones are just about being very present on the stage and absolutely saying, "This is what I'm doing right now, and this is what I'm doing for you. Here it is. I'm giving it everything." And that's what I try to do when I'm on stage. Is really just try to be there and giving everything that I have, and being present. This is, and we talk about being present all the time. It's actually it can be really difficult for people with attention deficit disorder.
Big time. I've been practicing Taoism for the last 2 years, trying to master that skill of not being everywhere all at once.
But being present on stage. So one of the things I get distracted by television like crazy. So anytime I'm doing a gig in a bar and they have a big TV on, I have to not get angry because it can be so distracting.
So don't book you for Super Bowl Sunday. Is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully you're never playing opposite Super Bowl Sunday. I played at the Raven, and they had the Calgary Stampede playing on a big screen, and I was just and it is so interesting.
Yeah,
because it's exciting. It's not something I'd ever really watched before, so it was inherently more interesting.
Oh, yeah?
I had to, and it's a good thing that I'm practiced enough that I can get through half a song and then realize, wait, okay, did I do that part already? Yes, okay, I just got to finish this now. But the other thing is, the other thing I learned from watching performers was this idea that people don't want you to apologize for being there. It's really, really, because I've been to a lot of open mics and I've watched people, and I would get up on stage and act like I'm imposing on I mean, it's still very hard for me to not feel like I'm imposing on people's attention. But just this idea that, like, if you go up there apologizing or acting like you're not supposed to be there or whatever, people are going to feel like you're imposing on them. If you go up there, not that you're trying to impose on them, but just that you're supposed to be there. There's a mic on stage. People showed up to listen to somebody that's playing on the stage. You go up there and just do it because you want to do it and because you're trying to give this to people, and no apologies. No apologies. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It works.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk? Talk. Don't mutter it. Don't say it like you're whatever you're going to do. You know, oh, I wrote this song about whatever, and like that's it. People, it's going to turn people off.
Yeah.
I wrote this song about whatever. People are like, all right, this is cool. Now you're telling me a story, and I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Right. And and that's I mean, that's when I talked about Damien Rice as being this guy that was the best show I've ever saw. I mean, he was just him on the stage, and he spent probably a quarter of the whole show talking, and he apologized for it afterwards because he was really just into talking and sharing what he was feeling. He says, I don't know why I'm doing all this. I'm wasting your time. And everybody's like, no, keep talking, because he's telling some great stories. But he comes out and he does stuff that's his stuff, doesn't sound like anybody else's, doesn't apologize for it.
I feel very lucky when I go to shows and the musician or the band member actually decides to do that sort of thing, because it feels like they're engaging with you. Like they
absolutely,
you can tell that like it's not just an act to them, it's their life.
Mm-hmm.
And like at some points they need to get some things off their chest, or they need to talk about how much they've enjoyed their time there and like share what they've liked about it. And it makes you feel like it's more than just like they're just trying to get through a show, and that they actually enjoy being around you as much as there's like another 1,000 of you around them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is it's really unfortunate that you have to fight against any shyness or introverted tendencies in order to be an effective performer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I'm an extrovert, so people start talking to me and I get more energy and that sort of stuff. And people who are introverted are being drained by that. You know, and of course the trick there is to find the people that you can connect with, and the one-on-one connections that then give you energy. But it's about making that connection as a performer, and you know, really just trying to add more. I mean, you're really trying to add more content and more emotional meaning to the whole thing. Because you do a song, so I write a song, right, and I write some lyrics and I write the chords, and I'm trying to make this into this thing that presents some kind of emotion or feeling or whatever. Nobody writes music to not invoke feeling of some sort or another, including John Cage's 4 minutes and 22 seconds of silence. He wrote it specifically to invoke he wrote it specifically to invoke a some sort of reaction,
mm-hmm.
right, and to engage. So you do all that, and then you present it out there, and then you need to perform it. And this is his opportunity to add even more emotional content and more humanity to. And again, it's that creative artist human triad. People want depth of experience, and the more layers that you can add on that fit together, the better it's going to be.
Well said.
Yeah,
that's good. That's very well said.
Easier said than done. But.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that's why they make the big bucks, right? It's like,
well, you know, and I mean, talking about how I'm always problem solving, I'm using my creativity to solve those kinds of problems too.
Yeah.
Looking at what worked and what didn't work, looking at how I felt about it, and, you know, what felt good to me. Because obviously I want to do the things that feel good to me.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm trying to do stuff and it feels really awkward, then either I need to practice that so that it's less awkward, or maybe it's not the right thing for me. It's not the elegant solution for me. I'm fighting against the way things want to flow in order to produce something that's not really as authentically me anyways.
So what are some of those things that feel good to you, for example? Like, can you name anything in particular? Like, is it something that you get out of a performance or something that you see?
Well, I mean, I love for me, it's all people adoring me. No, it's the adulation. No, it is the connection. You know, I mean, it's funny, right? I grew up as kind of the geeky kid that wasn't ever popular, and so. Being liked by strangers is definitely, or being able to engage with people I don't really know, is definitely a high for me.
Yeah.
So you know, when I do a show in a small space and people, you know, are making eye contact, maybe singing along, or they say something afterwards. Hey, can you play this song, or any of that sort of stuff? I really like that. And again, I'm an introvert or an extrovert, so you know, engaging with crowds is something that really works for me. You know, I'm also I think of myself as a fairly empathetic person, and I really like sort of making connections with people. So when I can connect and I can feel that I've moved them in some positive manner, which doesn't mean it has to be a happy, trippy, whatever song. You know, I talked about doing Someone Like You and doing this song, and everybody feels that song, right? I mean, except for the people that hate Adele, which are few and far between, but I know them and I understand why they hate them. It's cool. But you know, I do this song and people don't really recognize it, but it sounds pretty and it's, you know, it kind of moves along, and then all of a sudden they realize it and you see that light up, and then there's that feeling that you've evoked in them. And maybe it's a wistful feeling, because it's a very wistful, sad song. But it's also people wrap themselves in wistful feelings all the time. And it can feel very good, right? It gives people a chance to engage with negative feelings in a way that's not necessarily negative. And so whatever I'm doing there, you know, that feels really good. Whether it ends up, one time I was doing this gig and it ended up as a dance. People, you know, alcohol really makes people want to get up and dance anyway. So it ended up as a dance party. Or I'm doing, you know, Rolling Stones songs and you know, and they're rocking along to Sympathy for the Devil or whatever, and that's a great feel good vibe, and you know. And but again, if I can do a song, you know, like, well, especially when I can do one of my own songs that I wrote, knowing that I had a very sort of important emotional message to connect to, a song like 17, which is about the Parkland shootings in Florida, and the kids coming up afterwards and marching on Washington and saying, "Hey, we don't want this anymore. Can we change it?" And then, of course, nothing's changed. But it's a very much a wistful, moving song. And my wife's like, "You shouldn't do that all the time because it brings people down." I'm like, I want it to bring people down. I want to make that impact,
instill that emotional response,
and make people think about that. I mean, because I do recognize that being on stage is a platform, and anytime that people, it's the Spider-Man philosophy. Anytime that people give you power, you have a responsibility to use it properly.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes, absolutely. You know, and so people have given me this responsibility, and since I can do these things and I can write these songs and I think about these things, you know, in many ways it feels like I should. There's another song. Apparently, I write all my really important songs have numbers for titles, but 215, which references the 215 unmarked graves that were found at the residential school in Kamloops.
That's where I'm from.
Right. So you know, and that came out, and then like a week later, I was doing this songwriting thing, and they were like, write a protest song or a political song, and I was like, well, I know what I'm writing about, and I wrote what's an incredibly moving song, I think, called 215, and but I don't do it all the time because it really,
it's heavy.
It's heavy. It's a little bit scathing, because I recognize that you know, people in privilege like myself aren't comfortable with saying I'm here because of privilege and not because of my own merits necessarily, or there's the guilt, or there's the whatever. I mean, it's a very heavy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I wrote this song, I could not speak to the Native experience.
Yeah.
I could not speak to the experience of people who
Indigenous
this
peoples.
was done to, or who grew up in families where this was done to, or have experienced any of the side effects of this. But I knew it was important. So, I said, I recognized that this was as momentous occasion as planes flying into the Twin Towers, or somebody shooting a president on a grassy knoll in Dallas. People said, where were you when JFK was shot? Where were you when the lights went out? Where were you when 9/11 happened? I wasn't alive for the first two, but I know exactly where I was when 9/11 happened.
Not a lot of people ask, where were you when they found the graves?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but that's literally the lyrics.
Be.
Where were you when you heard 215?
Wow. That seems like a very appropriate way for you to approach that topic as a songwriter too, especially in recognizing your own privilege and stuff. Like, a lot of people outside of the Indigenous community won't try to touch that topic out of fear of being criticized for, because they're not a part of that community. They don't understand what it is. But you don't have to understand it from its own culture's perspective if you can understand that it's still a fucking tragedy.
Yes.
That's and like that is just as universal as anything, right?
Yep.
And and I think that's a pretty brave and solid move. I've got to listen to this song. Like, honestly, that's impressive to me. A lot of people, especially white guys like you and me, like it feels like to speak on any of these issues, I don't know about society as a whole, but the most like viewed aspects of society currently, like our mainstream media and stuff, they make it feel a lot like because you're white and you have these privileges, you should not have any input on the issues at all. But at the end of the day, heartbreak is heartbreak and a tragedy is a tragedy. And if you approach it from that aspect rather than trying to speak out for that community, you're speaking in a voice of compassion towards them.
Yes.
That's a great way to do it. And that's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, my personal philosophy on all of that is I can't know exactly what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel empathy for what you're doing.
Yeah.
I can open myself up to listen to what you say your hurts are.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up as an outsider for myself. I have attention deficit disorder. I'm different. I know what it's like to be different and to feel outcast. I was majorly bullied in grade 5 and 6, and
you've experienced struggles of your own.
And so that I guess forced me to recognize that other people are going to have their own struggles too, and be able to accept that readily because I've been through stuff like that myself, not to the same extent, but.
But if you zoom
trauma is still trauma, regardless of what it is.
If you zoom out enough, right?
Again, it's for me that idea of being able to look at different things and seeing the similarities and being able to tie them together. So, we talk about being an ally, and I can listen to you, and I can hear what you have to say, and I'm going to listen to it with a critical ear.
Yeah.
Because I understand human nature.
Yep.
But I also understand human nature, and I have to be critical of my own responses to that. And so I think as long as we remain open to this, to the ideas of others, I mean, I think that's the key to everything in life, is just remaining open to the ideas of others.
Yeah.
But so in this case, and just again, making sure that people don't, that keep thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
It's so much human nature to just, oh, well, that's not happening anymore. Anybody talking about the war in Ukraine? Because that's still happening right now too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're talking about Gaza and we're talking about Israel.
But media is just like, look over here. Don't,
But
yeah,
well, and that's not even the media to me. That is human nature.
yeah,
That is
fair
it is
enough.
whatever the crisis du jour is. That's what people are going to focus on.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Yeah,
It's really
true.
easy to only want to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
Because that's what humans do.
Yeah, I mean, like, back
Most
to
of us.
your concept of back to your concept of or when you were talking about at the end of the day, a tragedy is a tragedy or whatever, and like you don't necessarily have the insight of someone from the culture, but you can still understand when something terrible is something terrible.
Yes.
There's a lyric by Jack Johnson that I go to a lot when it comes to situations like that I find ringing very true, and the song's called "It's All Understood," I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And the lyric is literally just, it's all understood, even if you don't understand. And it's all relative,
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow. That's a, I didn't know, your writing had gotten that deep. Thank you for that. And, we're in like the very little home stretch of the show now. So, I'm going to ask you to finish off with a message for anyone else trying to play music. What do you want to tell them?
Be yourself. Allow yourself to be yourself. That is the most important thing. Dig in to what feels great for you, and let that drive your creativity.
All right, listener. So Earl Jenkins has given you permission to just be yourself and be okay with being yourself.
Yep.
That's a good message, man. Any shout outs you want to give? Social media handles, Instagram pages, YouTube channels?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube.
Yep.
Do I even know my Earl Jenkins music, I think?
Okay, cool.
On Instagram. So.
We'll be sure to pop it up on the video once we're done editing and stuff for you anyhow.
You
so,
bet.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys, for watching. I'm Adam Aubrey, covering for Ryan Threlfall on Creative Conversations. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next one.
Jokes aside, I hope you enjoyed this special episode of Creative Conversations featuring my friend Adam Aubrey. Now, sit back and soak in Earl Jenkins' original song titled 215.
There's no excuse when you steal all the children. And crush all their hopes in the name of God. Took the land, starved them out in the name of progress. All the privilege I had never gave it a thought. Where were you when you heard 215? Oh, where were you? How'd you feel 215? Were you shocked, asking why, asking how? Did you stop? Did you cry? Where were you when you heard 215? 215 stolen lives. How many more times will we hear about stolen lives? How many more just disappeared? Well, life gives you moments you always remember. So I'm trying hard to keep hold of that day. I can't forget where I was, how I felt when I saw that number. A history blown apart, and it won't go away. Where were you when you heard 215? Oh, where were you? How'd you feel? 215. Were you shocked? Asking why? Asking how? Did you stop? Did you cry? Where were you when you heard 215? 215 started lives. Well, 215 started lives. 215 stolen lives. 215